Like and subscribe and click the bell icon to get new video updates.
The Twitter account Defending Australian Democracy Sydney, the cartoon appeared online early one Friday morning. Created by a far-right Australian party in the style of South Park, it lit up social media with its crude jokes and bogus claims about stolen elections. Tagged in the torrent of tweets was the Australian Electoral Commission, AEC. Within minutes, the federal agency responded, calling the video false and disappointing. The agency's actions quickly led Twitter to label the cartoon as misleading, and Facebook and TikTok took it down completely. The incident last month reflects the rising tide of misinformation Australia faces as it prepares to go to the polls on Saturday. But it also shows the benefit of a single agency overseeing a country's electoral process. "We're really standing on the front lines of protecting Australia's democracy," said Evan Ekin-Smith, the AEC's head of digital engagement. "If we're not in the conversations, arguing for elections, defending people's perceptions of democracy, well, who is?" In the United States, elections are overseen by a patchwork of partisan state and local officials. Add in the Electoral College and the system can sometimes seem chaotic or even susceptible to undue influence, as Americans learned in 2020. There are a myriad of major and minor differences in how electoral laws and regulations are administered across America, said Pippa Norris, a professor at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. This violates basic principles of equality and consistency in electoral processes and voting rights, leads to excessively partisan considerations gaming the system, and encourages numerous malpractices. Stephen J. Mulroy, a professor at the University of Memphis and the author of a book on American election law, called it the gold standard in election administration. Ariadne Van, a political scientist at the Australian National University, noted that few other countries have independent electoral commissions. "That is one of our good innovations, as well as compulsory voting," she said. "People in Australia trust those processes. They might not feel particularly warmly or trusting about the political actors, about politicians themselves and about political parties, but they do trust the institutions." The flood of misinformation that fueled the January 6, 2021, attack on the US Capitol hasn't spared Australia. Since the country's last federal election in 2019, Ekin-Smith said, false claims about Australian elections have skyrocketed. Some appear imported from the United States. "There have been claims around the use of Dominion voting machines," he said, citing a baseless claim pushed by former President Donald Trump and some of his advisors. "We don't use Dominion voting machines. We never have, and yet people are claiming that we are going to use them and that the election is rigged off the back of it." When Ekin-Smith joined in 2011, the AEC didn't even have a Twitter account. A decade later, half a dozen people now help him tweet at a blistering pace, up to 24 times per hour. It also has accounts on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube, has partnered with TikTok on an election guide, and has held an Ask Me Anything on Reddit. "We're not blind to the fact that social media moves incredibly swiftly," Ekin-Smith said. "And the action that social media organizations can take is brilliant. But the action we can take even quicker by responding on our channels is perhaps going to be even more effective. That action is sometimes serious, as when the AEC recently referred an allegedly doubly registered candidate to the Australian Federal Police for investigation. Their meme game is pretty strong," Vman said. "And the informal language is really important. It's personalized. It's using everyday norms of engagement. And that is the kind of thing that people will notice and will share." The snappy tweets do occasionally draw pushback from critics who think the AEC should be more staid, or even silent. But Ekin-Smith said it was important to talk to people on their terms. "We're a bunch of public servants," he said. "But most of Australia isn't, and they don't talk like them, so why should we?" With the election approaching, the AEC has received scores of complaints about false or misleading statements by candidates, parties or influence groups. It polices only information about the political process, not political speech. A party or candidate talking about another party, their policies, their history. We cannot be the regulators of truth for that, Ekin Smith said. We don't have legislation that allows it. But also there would be some practical problems and some perception problems if we were making decisions on those things. In March, for example, a